The marble columns of the White House gleam under the afternoon light as President Donald Trump steps toward the podium. The sound of applause fills the East Room. Republican senators rise to greet him, their faces a blend of anticipation and deference. Cameras flash, capturing a moment that the president intends to turn into a declaration of political urgency. Donald Trump has returned to a familiar theme, demanding that his party stop playing by the old rules and start using every tool of power available. He tells the gathered senators that the time for restraint is over. It's time for the Republicans to do what they have to do, which is to end the filibuster. It's the only way, he says. His tone carries both warning and challenge. If you don't end the filibuster, he adds, you'll be in a bad way. We won't pass any laws. The statement draws quiet murmurs among those seated behind him. To some, it sounds like strategy. To others, it feels like provocation. The filibuster, a rule requiring a supermajority of 60 votes in the US Senate to advance most legislation, has long been defended as a symbol of consensus politics. But to Trump, it represents paralysis. He continues, repeating the demand for emphasis: terminate the filibuster. It's the only way you can do it. And if you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation. There will be no laws passed for 3 years and 3 months. That's a long time. His cadence slows, underscoring every word. Around him, the applause builds again, though not uniformly. Across the front row sits Vice President J.D. Vance, listening intently, hands clasped. Nearby, Senate Minority Leader John Thune nods politely as cameras pan across the chamber. The scene is heavy with political symbolism, the president urging his own allies to dismantle a key Senate tradition in order to advance his legislative agenda. Then Trump pivots. He moves from Senate rules to the issue that has defined his political message for years. Elections. We should take care of our own laws, he declares. We should pass the voter ID law. We should pass the law banning mail-in voting. We should pass all the laws. We want to make our elections safe and secure because California is a disaster. A lot of states are disasters. It's classic Trump, a mix of grievance, urgency, and populist appeal. Behind him, banners display the emblem of the presidency. In the crowd, senators exchange glances. For many, the president's message is unmistakable. Loyalty will be measured not by words, but by action. The voiceover shifts to context. The practice Trump is denouncing, mail-in voting, has existed in the United States for over a century, primarily designed to make it easier for military personnel, senior citizens, and those far from polling stations to vote safely. But since the 2020 election, Trump has repeatedly called it a source of massive fraud, despite audits and investigations finding no widespread irregularities. Today, however, the focus is not only on electoral mechanics, but also on power itself. The call to abolish the filibuster echoes a wider frustration inside Washington, where legislative gridlock has become the norm. Ending it would mean simple majority control in the Senate, could push through laws without the traditional check of bipartisan compromise. Trump's voice grows sharper as he recounts his personal voting experience. They said about mail-in ballots that if there would definitely be corruption because they pass through many hands, he insists. He recounts his own visit to a polling station in Palm Beach, Florida. You go to vote and they ask for your card. Even I went to Palm Beach, they say. I'm sorry to ask you this, sir, but I have to check your ID. I said, that's all right. I like that. For supporters, it's a straightforward argument. Voter identification equals election integrity. For critics, it's another attempt to sow distrust in the electoral system. As the applause dies down, aides behind the scenes are already framing the speech as a defining moment. According to senior Republican staff, the president's push is aimed not only at energizing his base, but at forcing senators to take sides between tradition and transformation. Outside on Pennsylvania Avenue, a handful of protesters wave signs calling for voting rights for all. Nearby, counter-protesters cheer the president's call for stricter voting measures. The contrast reflects a nation once again divided over the mechanics of democracy itself. Political analysts interpret Trump's remarks as a twofold strategy. First, by urging the end of the filibuster, he seeks to reshape how power is wielded in Congress. Second, by opposing mail-in voting, he continues to frame the electoral process as compromised, unless controlled through tighter restrictions. Inside the room, Vice President Vance remains composed, a quiet observer who has emerged as a bridge between Trump's populist base and the Senate's institutional wing. His expression, serious but measured, reveals the tension within the Republican ranks. Senator John Thune, who has previously voiced support for preserving Senate traditions, faces a delicate balance how to align with the president without alienating moderates. Sources within the chamber later described the moment as intense but inevitable, a reflection of growing impatience with legislative deadlock. The voiceover continues, explaining the broader implications. The filibuster has often been used by both parties to block sweeping legislation from civil rights to healthcare to judicial appointments. Removing it could allow the majority party to pass bills more rapidly, but it would also mean that when power shifts, so does the entire legislative landscape. Trump's critics, including several constitutional scholars, warn that such a move could dismantle the very spirit of checks and balances. Yet his allies counter that the gridlock of recent years has left the Senate paralyzed, unable to respond to the nation's challenges. The president's words, though familiar, are carefully timed. They come as Congress faces debates on budget allocations, election laws and foreign aid, all stalled by partisan divides. Ending the filibuster could give Trump an open path to reshape federal lawmaking should Republicans regain full control. But beyond the Senate chamber, the battle over mail-in voting carries emotional weight. Since the pandemic, tens of millions of Americans have relied on postal ballots. In states like California, Colorado, and Oregon, mail-in systems are long-standing and heavily audited. Yet Trump's narrative that ballots pass through too many hands continues to resonate with supporters who distrust the process. At rallies, Trump's call for voter ID and no mail-in voting has become a recurring chant. His latest remarks are designed to bring that energy back to Washington, turning populist rhetoric into legislative demand. The voiceover describes the imagery of the event. Behind the president, the American flag stands tall. To his right, the vice president nods as aides hand over new talking points. To his left, a row of senators exchange brief notes, uncertain whether to applaud or wait. The atmosphere is charged a mix of loyalty, apprehension, and raw political theatre. In one corner, press correspondents from major networks jot down every line. The question on many lips: is Trump serious about dismantling a core Senate rule, or is this a calculated pressure tactic ahead of upcoming midterm negotiations? Analysts note that the call to end mail-in voting and the filibuster is not merely procedural, it symbolizes Trump's vision of absolute political clarity, a government run without what he views as obstruction. A senior administration official later tells reporters that the president wants a clean slate for his remaining years in office, meaning laws passed quickly without what he calls bureaucratic delay. That vision, however, raises concerns about the erosion of bipartisan dialogue. The journalist's tone deepens, explaining the stakes. If the filibuster were abolished, a simple majority, 51 votes, could pass most legislation. It would make it easier to enact sweeping reforms, but could also allow future majorities to reverse them with equal ease. Historically, both parties have debated limiting or reforming the rule. Democrats removed the filibuster for judicial appointments in 2013. Republicans later extended that precedent to Supreme Court nominees. What Trump is now suggesting, full termination, would go further than any modern administration has dared. Meanwhile, his remarks on mail-in voting echo broader Republican efforts at the state level. In several legislatures, bills have been introduced to tighten absentee ballot rules, require photo identification, or restrict ballot drop boxes. Supporters claim these measures prevent fraud. Opponents call them voter suppression tactics. Back in the East Room, Trump finishes his speech with a familiar flourish, defiant, confident, certain of his message. We should pass all the things we want to pass to make our elections secure and safe, he repeats. The audience responds with sustained applause. As he steps away from the podium, the journalist questions begin to rise. Will the administration push for formal legislation to ban mail-in voting nationwide? Will the Senate leadership actually move to eliminate the filibuster? No definitive answers come, only a promise from White House aides that all options are on the table outside the debate intensifies. Legal experts warn that federal attempts to override state-level voting systems could face constitutional hurdles. Civil rights groups prepare statements opposing any move to restrict absentee ballots. Yet for Trump's loyalists, the message is already clear: strength, control, and political certainty. The camera lingers on Trump as he exits the room. His expression is calm but satisfied. He waves to supporters before disappearing behind the curtain. The applause continues, echoing against the high ceilings of the White House. The journalist's closing voiceover draws the scene together. In Washington, one speech can redefine the next political season. For Donald Trump, calling to end both mail-in voting and the Senate filibuster is more than a procedural demand. It's a challenge to the very structure of American governance. Supporters call it decisive leadership. Critics call it dangerous erosion of democratic balance. As the lights fade and senators return to their offices, the question remains: will the Republican Party follow the president's call or defend the traditions that have long defined the Senate's cautious pace? In the corridors of Capitol Hill, that debate has already begun. And tonight, the White House once again finds itself at the center of America's enduring struggle between speed and stability, between authority and restraint, between the will of one man and the rules of the Republic.